send you a handout. Just a second though. I'm not sure how to send the handout here. All right, so I'll just begin without the handout because we've wasted so much time already. So I apologized for the difficulties. It's been a bit difficult to start this seminar. So let me start with introducing myself. My name is Andrey Chsherbakov. I'm a PhD student at Graduate School of Education at Nazarbayev University. And I'm the first in the series of webinars that our students have organized. So most of them will be devoted to academic writing, and some of them will be devoted to research methods, and also some skills that are necessary for successful education. So this is the first one in the academic writing series, and today we are going to focus on essay writing. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we will continue this series of seminars about essay writing, and my partner, Mayra, will also join me in discussing some aspects of essay writing. So what we are going to talk about today. So first, I will talk briefly about academic writing in general and the academic essay genre. Then we'll discuss the structure of an academic essay. And then we'll talk about tips for writing introductions and then tips for writing conclusions. At the end, I will give you homework, which is optional. If you want to do it, you can. If you don't want to do it, it's okay. But if you decide to do your homework, I will give you feedback. Personally, I will send it to your email. Okay, so what is academic writing? So academic writing is writing done by scholars, which includes students or academics, for other scholars to read. I understand that most of you participants are students of universities, and you are included in this group of scholars who are involved in academic writing. And I also understand that many of you are studying in English or planning to study in English, so you have some idea of what the IELTS exam is, and you're probably familiar with what academic writing in this testing system is. But besides essays, I would like to do a little survey. What other academic genres do you know? So I would like you to go to this web link. I will just write it to the chat, the link. If you could just go to this web page and write whatever academic genres you know. So the link is in the chat. You could go to this web page and write whatever academic genres you know, not just essay, something else. I'll give you about a minute to a minute and a half. Have you been able to use this link? I'm not seeing any responses. All right, they're starting to come up. So I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. So I see the most popular response is article. We have report, research, reviews, paper, dissertation, textbooks. I also see some things that are not really academic. For example, motivation. What is motivation? Do you mean motivation letter? And we have critical review. Okay, that's also academic. Letters. I don't think letter is an academic genre. All right, so let's stop. So I see that most of you have an idea about what academic genres are, and most popular of them are, of course, articles and research papers. Let me switch back to the slides. All right, so here's what I wrote. Journal articles, monographs, textbooks, theses and dissertations, group project reports, etc. So what is special about academic genres, academic writing in general? So there are these 4 characteristics of academic writing that distinguish it from any normal writing. So first, it's formality. So when you write academically, you have to use academic style, which is very dry, impersonal. You have to avoid emotional language or subjective language. You can't use evaluative adjectives like interesting, wonderful, or big or small. You have to be very subjective. You have to be very specific in describing things. Second characteristic is efficiency. You have to be very efficient in your text. You must avoid repetition of words, repetition of ideas. You have to be very concise, which means that you write as few words as possible. So chunk out all the unnecessary words. And you have to proofread very carefully in order to guarantee efficiency. The third characteristic is modesty. You have to be very impersonal. Means you don't need, you can't boast, you can't say that something is your achievement, something is your idea. You have to be very modest. You have to avoid sweeping claims or generalizations. You can't say that everybody is such and such or everything is such and such. And for that reason, you have to be cautious and use hedging language. So we'll discuss that later. And the last characteristic is clarity. You have to be very clear and precise in all the claims and statements that you give in academic writing. So you see, it's a very specific type of writing activity, very different from normal letter writing or fiction. So we talked about different genres of academic writing. And when we talk about knowing a genre, many people think that this is just, knowing the style of a genre, so knowing how to build a sentence maybe, or what vocabulary to use. But knowing a genre is actually much more than just knowing the language which needs to be used. There are 4 components to genre knowledge. So the first one, which is usually understood as genre knowledge, is the formal genre knowledge. It means that you know the conventional structure of a genre. For example, if you're talking about an essay, you know that an essay consists of 3 parts: the introduction, body, and conclusion. You know characteristic vocabulary and grammar. You know which words to use in a particular genre and which grammatical structures to use. You know referencing rules, for example. You know how to cite other people's work, how to write reference lists at the end of an article, an essay. You know formatting rules. You know what fonts to use, indents, headings, etc. But this is only part of genre knowledge, the formal aspects. Also, the process genre knowledge, which is the knowledge of the steps involved in producing the work in a particular genre. Knowing the procedures of working in a particular genre is as important as knowing the formal characteristics of it. For example, if you are trying to produce work in an academic presentation genre, an academic conference, there are certain steps that you need to take in order to achieve your result. And if you don't know all these steps, if you lack this knowledge of the process, then you fail to produce work in this genre. And the third aspect is the rhetorical aspect. It means that you understand the audience of your text and their expectations. You understand the purpose of the text, and you know how to use this understanding of audience and purpose to achieve the result that you want. So this is the part of genre knowledge that most students struggle with. So they sort of read the task and they start writing without actually thinking who is going to read their text and what they're trying to achieve with this text. And the last one is more or less obvious, the subject matter knowledge. It means that you understand the subject that you're writing about, you know specific terminology, and you follow this specific terminology instead of writing everyday synonyms of this terminology. And you know the key experts in the field, so you cite the works of other authors and experts. So knowing a genre, knowing the genre of an academic essay involves all these four components. So when you want to improve your essay writing skills, you have to think about all these four things, not just the language part. But in our short sort of series of seminars, we're not going to focus on all of these. We will mostly talk about the first part, the formal aspects, and even so, we were going to talk only about certain aspects because it's a sort of short amount of time that we can spend on this. But if you're interested in learning more, and if we can help with something that you need help with, please let us know. I will give my contacts at the end of the seminar, and then you can contact us. So before moving on to the actual subject of our seminar today, the introductions and conclusions, I will briefly talk about the process component of genre knowledge, the essay writing process. So as I said, this is as important as knowing the language of a particular genre. So in the essay writing process, we have these steps. First, you plan your writing project. It means that you sort of foresee what steps you need to take and allocate time accordingly. Next, you analyze the question or the task and produce an outline. And finally, the next is you do some research or make notes if this task does not involve reading any material. Then you produce a draft, first draft, and then subsequent drafts if it is necessary. Then you proofread and present your work. In university settings, it might be submitting the work to your teacher, or in some other settings would be like in academic publication. This would mean sending your work to a journal, and then finally receiving feedback and analyzing these feedbacks. But we are going to focus on university type of essay, so not academic publication. So then the rhetorical aspects. So remember, this is the third component of academic genre knowledge. So in case of essay writing, so who is your reader? At university, this is usually your teacher or tutor or examiner, especially if you're talking about some international language system, for example, IELTS or TOEFL, this is your examiner. The purpose of your writing would be to produce a text that would allow the reader to assess your understanding of a topic or exam question. So knowing this purpose, you need to think of your writing as this three-component task. So first, you need to find out more that you have been taught in class. You need to do some research. You need to evaluate different points of view and corresponding evidence. That is, you need to analyze different sources, different authors, and you need to develop your own point of view. You need to synthesize these authors or these authors' points of view to make a conclusion. So, and the final purpose of your writing would be to be able to use language to show the results of these above activities. So this is the rhetorical aspect. And so we've discussed the other aspects, and we go back to the first aspect. So remember, the first aspect was the formal genre knowledge aspect. So knowing the structure and the language that we use in a particular genre. So in this case, essay. So what is the structure of essay? It is the same both for short essays like IELTS, TOEFL, or SAT essays, and long essays. So it has these three parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. The difference is in the short essays, IELTS essay, which is maybe 250 or 350 words, your body would consist of 2 or 3 paragraphs, and each paragraph would be devoted to one particular point. Whereas in longer essays, for example, a final course paper at university, which is several thousand words, might be 1,500 or 5,000 words, your body would consist of multiple paragraphs, and these paragraphs are likely to be separated into sections. And each point would be developed not in one paragraph, but in several paragraphs. But the basic principle is the same. You have three parts. And now we are going to talk about the introduction and conclusion. The body is more important and it needs more time. It will be discussed in the second and the third seminar that will be conducted by Mayra. So the introduction, the basic structure of this introduction is this. So first, you give a description or explanation of the situation or problem. It's very general. Then you say why the situation or problem or more specific aspect of this larger problem is important. And finally, you say what your aim is in the essay and what your position on the situation or problem is, and what the organization of your essay will be. So these 3 parts are included in the introduction. So what is the purpose of introduction then? So the first is you demonstrate that you have understood the question or the task of the essay, and also you present a roadmap for the reader. So you're going to say what the structure of your essay, of your argument will be. Because you are going to change your argument as you write it, so it is advisable to write the last part, the roadmap part of the introduction, after you finish the body. But the first part, so I can go back, the first part, the description of the situation or problem and the justification of the importance of the problem, it needs to come first, because it will help you develop the argument. Right? So there's a question in the chat saying, what is roadmap? So roadmap is the plan, the steps that you're going to take in the development of your argumentation that you present to the reader, so the reader is prepared to take in your argument. So it is easier for the reader to understand the flow of your ideas. Right? So let's look at one example of introduction. The task here was it would be better. Sorry, there's an extra comma here. It would be better not to let pupils use calculators at all in their maths lessons. Discuss. So this person wrote this introduction. It may be a good idea not to let students use calculators in maths classes, but there are also reasons why they can be helpful. This essay will first address the role calculators play by considering their benefits as well as possible drawbacks. Then I shall present a simple argument for the use of calculators by explaining the fundamental purpose of an educational system before concluding that we should not reject the use of calculators in a learning environment. So can I ask you just quickly to write your response in the chat, saying what are the good and the bad things about this introduction? What are the positive things that you find in it, and what are the negative things? So you have this text in your handouts. In my slides, I just scroll back to the basic structure. So compare this text with the basic structure and tell me, do you think this introduction is good or bad, and why? So I don't see any responses. Did you understand the task? All right, so I got one response. There is no good description of the problem. Okay. Any other? Can you please write in the chat your feedback to this introduction? Okay, we have a problem not to let use a calculator. Cornish wrote. Gulnara wrote that this is good. The author introduced the aims of the essay and explained what the organization of the essay will be. Right? So let's wait for one more response and then we'll discuss. Okay, Farida wrote, I think he includes all steps. Good. Well, I think, oh, there's another one. Maybe too general problem, educational purpose, not good. I think you're being a little bit generous. So my feedback would be, the student understands the question, discuss. So in his essay, he demonstrates that he's going to discuss. But there are multiple problems with this introduction. First, he does not explore the situational problem. He simply says, sorry, he simply says it may be a good idea not to let students use a calculator in math classes. So it doesn't really state there is a problem. So it's not clear why we need to discuss this. Why is this important? Right? So he does not explain the importance of the subject. However, he provides a roadmap. So in fact, the only good thing about this introduction is that there's a detailed roadmap. Yes, most of the introduction is devoted to the structure of the essay. Of course, roadmap is important, but it is significantly less important than stating the problem and substantiating the importance of this problem. Okay, so in general, I would say this introduction is rather poor. Right? So let's look at another example. Right? This example is also in your handouts. So it's the same topic, and the introduction says, calculators are useful pieces of equipment and are very popular in mathematical learning. However, some of their functions have raised concerns with maths teachers about the harmful effects on the students' ability to improve their learning. This is why the idea of forbidding the use of calculators is being discussed. I think this opinion is too extreme and limited. Right? So I will ask you again to write your response to this introduction. Is it good or bad, and why? Right, I got one response saying there is no clear roadmap. Okay, I would agree with that. That's the challenge, however, that we have you, Nurmanova, saying it discusses the problem but lacks the roadmap. Right, I see you're being more critical now. Shanara says there is a good explanation of the problem, but without roadmap. Good. The author has written the importance. Great. I think you're getting the point now. There's let me go back to the slides. Birk also says you're not supposed to give an opinion on the introduction part. I wouldn't agree with that. I think you can give an opinion. And sometimes I think it would be actually good to give an opinion in the introduction, so the reader understands what you're driving at, what you're planning to write in your essay. And Gulsim wrote, it is good because both sides have discussed. Yes, so there's like a balanced introduction saying there are 2 points of view, and the author is going to discuss them, right? So let me go back to my slides and reveal what I was thinking about this introduction. So I thought that the student explains how the problem arises. So this is a very good thing. So he states clearly, he or she states clearly the problem, yes? So the calculators are good, but some people are concerned. So this is a problem. And this also presents the importance because this threatens the student's ability to improve learning. Clearly, this is an important thing to discuss in this case. Also, the author clarifies his or her point of view. So this is actually good, not a bad thing. So in the end, he or she says, I think this opinion is too extreme and limited. So we already know what he's going to write in the body. He's going to argue that this point of view is not good. And the negative things about this introduction is that it does not explore the situation sufficiently to hint at the line of argument. So although he or she clarifies their point of view, there is no indication of how they're going to argue this point of view. Because there's no roadmap, as you all noticed. If the author wrote, so in this essay, I will do first, second, third, we would sort of have an understanding of how this person is going to argue this thing, or at least how the person understands this phenomenon. So I think these two examples have given you an idea of how to organize an introduction. Now we will move on we'll move on to discussing some particular tips about use of language, what grammatical structures and what vocabulary to use in introductions. So first is the first sentence. So what you want to begin with is some general comment. So as we said, it should be the introduction or the description of a problem or phenomenon. So it needs to be general, but not too general. So here I have given two examples of not very good first sentences. And on the right-hand side, I've given some improvements. So the first example is most people hold firmly to the belief that the English language is one of the most popular languages in the world. So this is a very general, too general comment. In fact, this sounds like a belief rather than a fact, because there's no reason for us to think that this is true. This is very vague. It contradicts the idea of academic style. In academic style, we don't write about beliefs. We write about facts, evidence, and logical conclusions. So an improvement to this first sentence would be, the English language is spoken as a first or second language by millions of people and is becoming even more popular because of its use in electronic communication. So this is something that everybody will agree with. There is no evaluative language like the most popular language in the world. So the fact that English is used by millions of people, nobody can argue with. Another example is, nowadays many people spend their time watching TV or surfing the internet. So this is a bit too obvious. This is in fact so general that it contains no particular idea, nothing to sort of hang on to for the reader. It doesn't focus the reader on anything. So you need to be more specific, more close to the topic. So an improvement to this first sentence would be, in the past few decades, traditional pastimes such as reading books have become less popular than technology-based activities such as watching TV and surfing the internet. So this is a bit more specific, and it drives the reader towards the topic and makes them anticipate what is coming next. So a good example of the first sentence here at the bottom is, globalization, a 21st century phenomenon, is having a great impact on countries, not just economically, but also culturally, educationally, and socially. So this is a very good general statement about a problem or an issue, globalization, and its impact on countries. It's quite general, but it also gives you an idea of what's coming next, so it's specific enough. Right, so we've talked about the first sentence. Here are some tips that might help you improve your first sentence, and that will help you avoid some common mistakes that many people make, especially those who have studied IELTS, essay writing, and tend to write very formulaic and not very academic style essays. So the first tip is, don't use off-the-shelf expressions like nowadays, or it has been debated. I know many of you in IELTS classes have learned to use this formula. Start all your essays with nowadays. So try to be specific to the topic. So instead of nowadays, think of the time frame that this particular question has. So if you're talking about the internet, might be in the past few decades, or if you're talking about globalization, you can say in the second half of the 20th century or something like this. So think about the specific situation, specific time frame, and try to use language that is appropriate to that particular situation, not something that is too general that you have memorized. Also think about using the appropriate tense. So if you're talking about something that is changing at the moment, so then use present continuous. So is becoming, or are having, or are living. Or if you're talking about some process that has started in the past and you're going to discuss the results of this process, then you use present perfect, like has become or have led. Also think about the words that you use for generalizations, especially nouns. So if you're talking about countable nouns, you have to use the plural form, people or fees or costs. And if it's uncountable nouns, then you use them, of course, in the singular form. But a very common mistake is to talk about these general things in the singular. So say a person or a fee or a student. But don't use singular for generalizations. Also, do not confuse fact with belief. So like in the example with the popularity of the English language, this obviously is a belief, not a fact. So the reason why this is a belief is it's a matter of opinion. You can easily find a person who doesn't like the English language, who would say it's not popular, or you can actually come up with examples of whole countries who don't like the English language. So think of people or opinions who would contradict whatever you want to say, and then it will be clear that this is a belief. And also try to use hedging. Hedging is sort of being cautious about your statements, not making overgeneralizations or sweeping claims. So this is quite easily done by adding some extra words like usually, often, likely, or unlikely. For example, you can say, so people often do something instead of people do something. When you say often, you are sort of making yourself sort of protected against counterclaims. There's always a person who will say, I don't do this, so why are you saying people do it? If you say often, then you exclude some people, and sort of you are protecting yourself from such counter arguments. So there's a whole class of these hedging expressions that you will discuss in the following seminars. So the next piece of language that we're going to talk about is a definition. It is very often useful to provide a definition in your introduction. So here is a formula that would help you produce such a sentence. So you can start with a term and then use one of these verb phrases, like is or is commonly defined, as is generally understood to refer, etc. And then the explanation. Or you can reverse it, start with explanation and then say explanation is called something or is known as or is referred to as. And as always, try to avoid being formulaic. Try to personalize your language and sentence structure. For example, instead of just using this formula, you can write something like this, as in the example at the bottom. Throughout this essay, I will be using the word cognitive to refer to the different types of intellectual behavior. So you use this basic structure, but you sort of surround it with some words that make it distinctive. Right? So this was about definitions. Sometimes it is useful to provide a definition to focus the reader on a particular aspect of the problem we are going to discuss. Then, as I've already talked about, the justification for the problem for the subject, you need to provide reasons for the importance of this problem, significance of this problem. So here is a tip on how you can do this very easily. You can just use a superlative adjective. So you can say one of the most significant causes of something is blah, blah, blah. Or some of the most important problems of something are blah, blah, blah. So just using a superlative adjective would give you a very quick and easy way of providing justification for the importance of the problem. You can also use one of these adjective-noun combinations at the bottom of the slide, like an important part of something or a key factor of something. So you will be given the slides at the end of the presentation, so you can look through them and maybe try to make use of them in your future writing. And finally, so the last part of the introduction would be stating the aim and the structure of your essay. So providing the roadmap for the reader. So this is easily achieved by saying something like, this essay will examine whether blah, 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 or this essay attempts to determine whether something, or the aim of this essay is to, or alternatively, you can say, this essay examines or argues, or in this essay, I will argue that. So this is for you to decide how you want to introduce the purpose of your essay. And then finally, for the roadmap, you can just list the steps that you're going to take in your argument. So here is an example. I will first discuss the reasons why Galen originally became popular. In the second section, I will offer explanation for his enduring popularity, after which I will explain the part that was played by the church and the state. So here, I would note that you would normally use the first person pronoun. So instead of saying the essay will do something and then, you would say I will first discuss and then I will do something else. It's better to use the personal pronouns here. Okay, so these were some points about writing introductions. Now we'll talk about conclusion. So the basic structure of conclusion is first to provide a summary of the main ideas related to the importance of the topic. Then a summary of your evidence with your evaluation of evidence. So this means that the sources that you have collected during your research stage and your evaluation of these sources, you provide a brief summary of what you've concluded about these sources. And finally, overall conclusion, or your answer to the question of the essay, is provided at the end of your conclusion. So here is another exercise for you. I would like you to look at this example of conclusion and identify the three parts of conclusion that I have just described. So this text is again in your handouts. I will switch back to this slide with the structure of the conclusion. And I will give you a couple of minutes to look at the text and then sort of separate the text of the conclusion into three parts, 1, 2, and 3. Right, so I'll give you about 2 minutes for that. Right, I won't be able to see your answers, so I'll just quickly switch to the slide with my answer. So the first part, which is the summary of main ideas, is simply the first statement, the first sentence. In conclusion, new technologies have provided a remarkable breakthrough, which has allowed society itself to become incredibly advanced. So this is the summary of what the essay basically said. And then the second part was summary of evidence. So here's the evidence. They have become highly developed, that provoked ethical questions about morality, blah, blah, blah. And then it ends with inequality in everyday scientific life. So this part of the text is the summary of the evidence. And then the final part is overall conclusion, or the answer to the question, is the last sentence. While new technologies have undoubtedly influenced postmodern thinking, the amount of research activity in the field in recent years suggests that the influence may also work the other way around. So the answer to the essay would be, there are two contradicting or counteracting forces, and so I'm sort of, I hold a balanced view on this. So this is my answer, balanced view, right? So if you stick to this type of conclusion structure, I think you would be safe in producing a good conclusion. And here are some tips again. Oh, sorry. Some tips, recommendations on writing conclusions again. So first, do not introduce any new ideas or arguments at the end of the essay. Only summarize. So this is a very common mistake in many people's writing. They try to re-engage with the reader and provide additional arguments towards the end of the essay. So this is a mistake. You only have to summarize whatever you've written in the body of your essay. And always refer back to the introduction. Make sure that the aim of the essay has been fulfilled. Whatever you wrote in the introduction as the aim of the essay, when you wrote in this essay, I will discuss blah, blah, blah. Or if you said, in this essay, I will argue that something, something. And in the conclusion, you have to match this. You have to say that I have provided evidence for this and this. There needs to be direct correspondence between introduction and conclusion. If there is no such correspondence, then this is a poorly structured essay. And also be careful with the verb tenses. If you refer back to the statements in the essay itself, you should use present perfect because the conclusion is part of the essay. So you say, I have argued that something, something, or something has been discussed. If you refer to facts, then you use present simple. So for example, it is difficult to adapt to the conditions of the quarantine. And if the question for the essay includes providing recommendations, you use some modal verb such as should or need or must. For example, you can say further research is needed or the situation should be addressed. Right, so this is basically all that I wanted to talk about in this seminar. So just to quickly recap, we talked about academic writing genre, and we talked about what constitutes knowledge of genre. And if you remember, knowledge of genre is not just knowing the language or the key expressions. It's the four components. Knowing the language, knowing the process is very important. You know, planning, drafting, getting feedback. Very important to understand what steps are involved in trying to follow these steps. If you're not following the steps, then you are not actually working in this genre. And then also rhetorical aspects, understanding your audience and understanding the purpose, and using this understanding to write an effective and persuasive text. And finally, knowing the subject matter, knowing what you're writing about, doing your research and then using the correct terminology and citing correct authors. And then we talked about the basic structure of academic essay, the structure of introduction, and the structure of conclusion. So this was very short. I hope you have taken in some ideas about writing academic essays. I encourage you to go back to these slides and think about the introduction, conclusion writing a bit more. And if you have time, I will ask you to write an introduction and conclusion in response to this essay topic. In your opinion, what are the most serious urban transport problems we are currently facing? Identify possible solutions and say whose responsibility these are. If you have time, you can actually write the whole essay or simply introduction and conclusion, and then send it back to my email, which is provided here at the last slide. And I will try to give you feedback as soon as I can. And before we go, can I ask you to go to this, to this link again? This is a different link, and answer a very simple question. So this link is also in your handout. This is the last link in your handout. I'll also copy it to the chat. Just a second. Here's the link. And we would be very grateful if you could answer this one question, just a couple of words. The question is, what is your biggest problem or challenge in academic writing? This will help us evaluate your needs and maybe adjust our own content for these seminars, or maybe seminars in the future. And this will also help us in our research, because many of us are involved in researching academic writing skills of Kazakhstani students. Right, some people are asking, can I just leave my email here and get PowerPoint? I think we are going to send the PowerPoint to this chat. Is this correct? So that was the original plan. I just got a message that you will receive the PowerPoint after you've sent your email or request to gsc@nu.edu.kz. Well, thank you very much for coming. I apologize again for the technical problems that we've encountered. I'm sure that the next seminar will go much smoother, and I'm looking forward to receiving your homework and seeing you at the next seminars. So make sure you send your requests to gsc@nu.edu.kz and you'll get your PowerPoints. Well, thank you very much and goodbye.